If you found yourself wandering the streets of Budapest in early April, you might have experienced some serious cognitive dissonance. You honestly could have thought that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was running in the Hungarian elections. No joke, his face was on billboards almost more often than any actual candidate. And this wasn't just some clever PR stunt. Outside forces were watching this election with bated breath, because those ballot boxes held the fate of much more than just one country in the heart of Europe. For years, Viktor Orbán had been rigging the system to become a sort of mini Putin inside the EU. He built a pocket autocracy funded by European money. In exchange for dirt-cheap Russian gas, he became the real Putin's ultimate, fail-safe agent of chaos right inside the European Union, single-handedly paralyzing Brussels. But then, the unthinkable happened. Orbán lost the election in a landslide. In this video, we're going to break down exactly how the collapse of his regime is a massive blow to Putin, how it strips Moscow of its biggest trump cards, and how this historic plot twist is about to completely flip the script on the war in Ukraine. Grab a snack, settle in. Let's get into it. To really grasp just how devastating the events of April 12, 2026 were for the Kremlin, we first need to uncover one fundamental truth: exactly how Putin used the Hungarian prime minister. For years, Viktor Orbán sold his people, and all of Europe, the image of an iron-fisted nationalist leader. The ultimate, uncompromising defender of Hungarian sovereignty, who bowed to no one and put his country first. But mere weeks before the election, that tough guy facade came crashing down so hard it rattled even his most hardcore fans. A massive wiretapping scandal dropped, exposing the highest levels of government. And what was on those tapes absolutely nuked the myth of the great independent prime minister. First, Bloomberg drops a bombshell, a leaked transcript of a private chat between Orbán and Putin from October 2025. And what does this proud champion of sovereignty say? He literally compares himself to a mouse helping a lion. A direct quote from The Intercept: "Yesterday, our friendship reached such a high level that I can help with anything in any matter where I can be of use. I am at your service." Let that sink in. I am at your service. The head of a sovereign European nation reporting to Moscow like an obedient middle manager. But wait, it gets worse. Another recording surfaces, this time between Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov.
Look, I am calling on the request of Alisher, and he just asked me to remind you that you were doing something about his sister.
Mrs. Ismailova.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is the following, that together with the Slovaks, we are submitting a proposal to the European Union to delist her.
Lavrov casually asks Szijjártó to do him a solid and lift sanctions on the sister of Putin's oligarch pal, Alisher Usmanov. In return, Szijjártó, like a textbook spy, leaks exactly what went down at closed-door meetings of European leaders. Looking at this, you have to ask, where does this fanatical obsession with Russia come from? Political analysts just laugh. It was never about love. It was essentially a premium loyalty rewards program from Gazprom. Block 3 aid packages for Ukraine and get a discount on heating absolutely free. Don't forget, in his younger days, Orbán actually built his political career on hardcore anti-Russian rhetoric. The reality is, Hungary was hopelessly hooked on cheap Russian energy. Through classified, off-the-books contracts, Moscow pumped oil and gas into Budapest at a massive discount. These cut-rate prices allowed Orbán's government to artificially cap the cost of gas and utilities for regular citizens. And in Europe, dirt-cheap utility bills mean ecstatic voters and guaranteed election wins. There might have been some direct offshore financial perks for the prime minister's inner circle too. We don't know that for sure yet. But the overarching scheme is crystal clear. Orbán was literally buying his grip on power using Putin's fossil fuels. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. In return, the Kremlin got something money can't buy: a personal agent of chaos implanted deep inside the European Union. Putin masterfully used the Hungarian prime minister to throw a wrench into the European machine. Brussels operates on consensus, meaning they need a unanimous vote from all 27 member states to get anything done. Orbán became that mouse who, on command, chewed through the wires. When the war broke out, Budapest became the ultimate roadblock for Western aid. The EU readies a historic €50 billion aid package to keep the Ukrainian economy from collapsing into hyperinflation. Orbán slams on the brakes and blocks the cash for months. Europe tries to reimburse countries for sending old weapons via the European Peace Facility. Orbán vetoes it, terrifying smaller nations into halting their weapons shipments because they can't afford replacements. Need to move artillery shells? Hungary, which shares a perfectly positioned border with Ukraine, slams the door on transit, creating a nightmare logistical bottleneck in Poland. Putin didn't need to go to war with the entire European Union. He had a guy on the inside who, for the price of some cheap gas, could paralyze an entire continent. Now let's talk about exactly what Moscow is losing right this second, now that the brake pedal in Brussels has snapped off. Enter a number that should be making the Kremlin sweat right now: €90 billion. Sure, this aid package hasn't been completely greenlit just yet, but the vibe in the halls of the EU shifted overnight. Right after the election, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen didn't even try to hide her relief, dropping a very clear statement. She bluntly said Brussels would start working with the new Hungarian government as soon as possible to ensure this money is unlocked quickly and smoothly. The signal is loud and clear. The lock is broken and the doors are wide open. But the most terrifying part for the Kremlin is what this money is actually for. While the previous packages, like the $50 billion Orbán held hostage for months, were mostly macroeconomic, propping up the Ukrainian currency, paying doctors and first responders, this $90 billion isn't just band-aids and tourniquets. This is the funding to make sure the guys who started this war are the ones needing bandages on an industrial scale. This is pure, concentrated military firepower. This cash is going straight into kicking the European defense industry into overdrive. We're talking millions of artillery shells. We're talking new air defense systems, heavy armor, drones, and precision missiles, flowing to the front lines without interruption. For Putin, this spells absolute disaster for the most critical equation of this war, the math of firepower superiority. Time used to be on Moscow's side. Every month that Orbán spent haggling for concessions and blackmailing Europe, the front line starved for ammo. Ukrainian artillery went silent because Europe was stuck in endless bureaucratic limbo. The Hungarian prime minister was the shield, protecting the Russian army from the combined industrial might of the West. Well, that shield is gone. Without its chief saboteur, the EU's bureaucratic machine can finally transform into the one thing Moscow dreaded most: a unified military assembly line. Decision-making is about to hit warp speed. The Kremlin bet everything on Ukraine running out of lead. But the fall of Orbán's regime means that a military arsenal the size of the entire European economy is plugging directly into the front lines right now. And the kill switch Putin used to stop it snapped in half. But you know what's even more valuable than €90 billion of ammo in modern warfare? Information. For years, the capital of Hungary, a NATO and EU member state, acted as a massive, uninterrupted vacuum cleaner for Russian intelligence. Budapest wasn't just a political ally. It morphed into a cozy, perfectly legal espionage hub for the Kremlin, right in the middle of Europe. Picture how absurd this was. Top NATO generals and EU leaders gather behind closed doors to hash out highly classified plans, logistics for weapon shipments to Ukraine, vulnerabilities in Russian defense lines, upcoming sanction lists. And sitting right there at the table are Orbán's guys. The very same guys whose foreign ministry, as investigative journalists revealed, had been completely compromised by Russian hackers for years. Moscow was reading Hungary's internal systems like an open book. And what did Orbán's government do when this leaked? Issue a démarche? Expel diplomats? Nope, they just pretended nothing happened, and Minister Szijjártó literally went to Moscow to accept the order of friendship from Lavrov. Remember the whole drama with the so-called International Investment Bank? The one that relocated to Budapest and had its staff granted full diplomatic immunity by Orbán? Inside Europe, it was openly known as a spy hub. Russian operatives could cruise around the entire Schengen zone, zero questions asked, zero luggage checks. For Ukraine, this was catastrophic. Fighting an enemy who is actively reading your biggest allies' group chats is like playing poker with your cards face up on the table. Western intelligence agencies, the CIA, MI6, European Intel, caught on a long time ago.
In recent years, it got so bad that they simply stopped sharing their most sensitive intel with Budapest. We ended up in this bizarre paradox. Hungary is in NATO, but NATO is hiding its secrets from Hungary because they know that by tomorrow morning, that classified folder will be sitting on a desk in Moscow. Now, Péter Magyar and his party have stepped into power, and unlike Orbán, he leans decidedly pro-European. Yes, there are plenty of skeptics whispering in the corridors right now. A lot of pundits are squinting at him, saying, hold on, this guy came up through Orbán's system. He's also a right-wing conservative. How do we know this isn't just a rebranding? But let's take the emotion out of it and look at cold, hard pragmatism. Magyar just inherited a country whose economy is completely tapped out. The EU has kept billions in life-saving funds under lock and key for years, specifically because of the corruption and democratic backsliding under the previous administration. To unlock those tranches, which Hungary desperately needs right now just to keep the lights on, the new PM has to prove one thing to the West, and fast. He has to prove that Hungary is a sane, reliable partner again. And the fastest, flashiest, and most undeniable way to win back the trust of NATO and the EU is to publicly and spectacularly kick every single Russian man in a trench coat out of the country. Losing their Hungarian radar means one simple, fatal thing for Moscow. They are now flying blind. They no longer know what sanctions are dropping tomorrow, how Europe is resolving its internal squabbles, or which logistical routes are going to deliver that 90 billion euros to the front. This is what real, historical, tectonic plates shifting looks like. On April 12, 2026, everyday Hungarians simply showed up to the polls, totally exhausted by the corruption, the inflation, and the endless lies of the old elite. They just wanted to change the government in their relatively small country. But the butterfly effect of those ballots dropped in the box just bulldozed a massive geopolitical fortress the Kremlin spent years building. Putin bet the house that Europe would crack first. He nurtured his pocket agent of chaos, hoping Viktor Orbán could drag this war of attrition out until the bitter end. But the roadblock is gone. And you know what the most fascinating part is? The teardown of Orbán's system has only just begun. What do you guys think? Will Péter Magyar be able to completely purge the country of the old elites? Or will Orbán's cronies just retreat into the shadows and sabotage the aid from the inside? Drop your predictions in the comments. I read all of them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to understand how global politics actually works. And I'll see you in the next video.